Plugin.
This is a gorgeous February 9th, 2013, isn't it, Paul?
It is.
We are live streaming to you from Broad Ripple. It's on the north side of Indianapolis.
Undisclosed location.
Undisclosed location with our live studio audience.
And Mark, we're having new viewers every day, every week, because we are now on Indiana Talks, and maybe I should reintroduce the program for some of our new viewers.
That's a good idea.
Civil Discourse Now is a show that Mark Small came up with a couple years ago. He decided that there was not enough civil discussion of issues, and I'm talking local, state, national, international issues. He thought there was too much talking over each other, too much yelling, and he wanted just to have a civil discussion of the issues. And that gave birth to the show Civil Discourse Now.
That and purchasing and otherwise purloining equipment and doing that stuff. And we were doing debates for a while, and then Paul came up with the idea of doing a panel format, and we started doing the panel format, and we've been streaming live from various local establishments and trying to give local merchants some airtime. And so if you're a local merchant in the Indianapolis area, give us, email us, and we'll be glad to consider streaming live from your establishment. We air 11 to 1 p.m. 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturdays, not 11 p.m.
That would be different, Mark.
That'd be 22 hours. And we stream live on Indiana Talks. Gary Snyder started Indiana Talks he started on Marion, Indiana radio station, but then he expanded it into an internet network, I guess you'd call it. There are other shows that are on this network. We don't necessarily agree with the views of the people who are on those shows.
And I don't agree with your views.
I don't agree with a lot of yours, Paul.
Yes.
But then I have a brain, so that's I'm just it's civil. But the thing is, it's a valuable thing for the First Amendment, and
yes.
that's today we have two guests. One who has not gotten here yet, but will be here shortly. Our guest here right now is Karen Celestino-Horseman. Karen is an Indianapolis lawyer, former member of the Indianapolis City County Council as a Democratic Party member. She's been on the show before. Welcome back, Karen.
Thank you.
And our other guest is Pat Andrews. She was held up in traffic. She'll be here in just a couple of minutes. Pat ran for City County Council for the Democratic Party and is a blogger on Had Enough Indy. She blogs a lot about local tax issues and local finance issues.
And she's from the west side of town, so she talks a lot about the airport, Decatur Township, that sort of thing.
And Decatur Township is the
furthest southwest township.
Yeah,
the least populated.
Marion County is a square, essentially, with a couple of little exceptions. But it's a square, and there are 9 townships that are pretty much equally shaped, and approximately. And so you've got three across.
3 north, 3 in the middle, and 3 in the lower.
And Decatur is down and to the left.
Mm-hmm.
Decatur has the airport. We've got several topics to discuss today. There wasn't any single individual thing that stood out this week. But one thing I have to address, and that's the very top, and this has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with greed and baseball.
Your two favorite topics.
Todd Helton, well, not necessarily.
No.
Todd Helton is he was almost hitting 400 as a major league batter for the Colorado Rockies a few years ago. Night before last, I think it was, or 3 nights ago, would have been Wednesday because that was the Powerball. This guy signed a 10-year contract for $160 million. He's at home, he's drunk, realizes he hasn't bought his lottery tickets, and jumps up, gets into his vehicle, and drives to buy his lottery tickets and gets popped for we would call it operating vehicle while intoxicated in Indiana. In Colorado, apparently, it's driving under the influence. It's called various things in various places. It all involves being drunk and driving. And I guess does that make any sense? First of all, to commit the offense itself, but secondly, that somebody who's already has 9 figures in wealth feels the need to run out. I mean, he could have bought a convenience store.
Yeah, he could have. As I said off the air, I think he's already won the lottery in terms of being a professional baseball player and being able to. I know he's earned it by his performance on the field, but he's already a multi-millionaire, and he doesn't. Does he really need more?
Well, and that gets to a thing where
this is a bad investment.
I mean, is there? It's not a bad investment. I just bought my little lottery tickets. As I read this story, I realized I hadn't bought my lottery tickets, and so I ran out and got them. But is that really? Is there an emphasis in this country on getting too much? I mean, we were in Canada one time on a trip, and a guy that was guiding us around Windsor said, we have our own billionaires here in Canada, but they don't seem to feel like they need more and more, and your guys do. Karen, what do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I've always thought it was ridiculous that we pay so much to sports figures because they have a particular type of musculature or whatever.
No, actually, it's eyesight. It's eyesight.
That allows them to do this.
Eyesight,
when we have people with, brainiacs who make a real difference in everybody's life, the quality of their life, and they don't get that kind of money. But even that aside, the fact that this happened to this man, I mean, really, that's not surprising. It's the kind of thing that we all deal with. That's our jobs. I mean, life takes these courses, takes these turns, in whether you've got money or you don't have money. Things happen, and you jump in a car, not exercising good judgment, obviously, because you're intoxicated, and you drive while you're drunk. I mean, how many people have you dealt with? I've dealt with them who've never had any other kind of criminal thing in their lives, who are just working men and women who make that kind of mistake and get popped for it. And it changes their, hopefully they don't do, the worst case is that they do property damage, although there does happen to be loss of life sometimes, but, it changes their lives.
And I know they exercise bad judgment and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but it's that he would feel such an incentive for an illusory notion of winning a $280 million Powerball that really isn't $280 million. When it's actually paid to you in a one-shot thing, I think it's more like $200 million.
No, more like half of.
Okay,
Well, plus you could have multiple winners.
And then taxes come off of that half.
yeah, so it's less than what he's already gotten.
But he was drunk. That's why, it's bad judgment. Whether he decided to go buy a lottery ticket, whether he decided he needed a new shirt, it doesn't matter.
But
What was his intoxication level, Mark? Does it mention that?
Oh, that's an interesting thing because it's read in the same kind of numerical configuration as the BAC is as a batting average.
Yeah.
So let's see what
Sure.
I don't see what he had here. It strikes me as being .015, which if he'd gotten close to his career batting average, he would have been clinically dead probably. .014.
Was that a
No,
blood
it'd be
test, or was that
0.15, you're right.
0.15.
I apologize.
Yeah. So that's nearly two
That'd
times
be
the legal limit.
that's pretty high.
Yeah, but that's it doesn't say in this article, but that was a regular thing he did every week, and it was such a strong compulsion that he felt the need to go out and do that.
And so, but what it is, you just find it remarkable that somebody will get drunk, go buy a lottery ticket, even though they had money?
No, I find that it's really remarkable that somebody with that much money would feel the compulsion. Oh, I forgot, I gotta go get my lottery tickets.
Why do you think people? Well, then that goes back to another thing. Why do you think people with money have money? I mean, have you? I've had lots of friends who have money. It's been my experience that the more money they have, the less likely it is that they're carrying cash or a credit card or anything like that.
Well,
so
a lot of the people I've known though, from college and stuff who had a lot of money didn't really deal with it as being something. They didn't worry about it. And it was like he felt so compelled to run out and buy lottery tickets that he didn't think of any other.
he was drunk. You can't judge that action.
Well,
by if he were sitting there sober. And if he had sat there and thought, gee, if I go out and drive, I could get in an accident, do you think he would have made the decision? Chances are he probably wouldn't, but he was drunk.
Did he get the ticket before he got popped or after?
Yeah,
and
did he win the lottery?
Did he spend for the extra, was it the extra $1 for Powerball? There's some kind of option. where you get a bigger return?
I think we're talking. Helton had driven to a gas station, so apparently he was on his way back. I have not read any reports that Major League Baseball player wins Powerball, so I don't think that he got that.
Apparently, the football players on the back of their ID cards, the NFL players on the back of their ID cards, they have a phone number. If they're ever out at a bar and they feel that they've drank too much and they can't be driving, they can call that number and they will come and pick them up.
And see, the same thing is available for the regular Joe Schmo. Taxi, yellow cab.
Well, It used to be illegal. It used to be, it was public intoxication to be in a cab.
In the state of Indiana.
In the state of Indiana. It was considered a public place, and you could get the meat. They would.
Yeah.
You could, in theory.
Yeah. In other words, if you were rude to the officer,
yes,
and were causing a problem, you could get arrested for public intox. But that's about the only.
What driving violation did he do? He ran off the road, speeding?
It just said DUI, so I don't know what the probable cause was for pulling him over.
Well, he obviously didn't. If he had hurt somebody,
you would have made that.
Yeah,
you would. I think the only damage he did was to his reputation.
And now he's lucky enough because here in Indiana, he would lose his license for 180 days. If he loses his license for any period of time and he can't drive, he's got enough money he can pay somebody driving around.
So it's just dumb things that jocks do. But when you realize also that
they're not getting paid for their IQ level now, are they?
Peyton Manning is.
Peyton Manning's exception to all rules.
To all rules. Well, but also something like 78% of professional athletes, like at the major level, meaning got in major leagues or the NBA or the NFL or the NHL, something like 78% of them go bankrupt within 5 years of their retirement. So
that's the same thing with lottery winners. A lot of those people end up losing their money.
He was trying to combine the two, so be a lottery winner and a professional athlete.
I remember one lottery winner who won several $1 million. They asked him what he was going to do with his money. He said he was going to buy a new trailer. So there's a certain mentality there.
It probably was a double wide.
Double wide? Go from a single wide to a double wide.
Okay, so what's next?
You don't like baseball. We had two trials this past week that have been very interesting. One trial, I blogged about that this morning. One trial was front page news on the Indianapolis Star every day this week, and the other trial was not mentioned in the Indianapolis paper at all. But that first trial involved sex, money, private jets, sex, and I'd always wondered why Don Marsh smiled in those commercials for Marsh Groceries. The other trial involved relatively well-placed political people with relatively high connections in the political world of Indiana, such as it is. But the trial wasn't here in Indianapolis.
Big-name politicians.
Big-name politicians. Our other guest panelist this week is with us, Pat Andrews. Welcome, Pat.
I apologize for being late.
You missed our story that we had about
about tips. We already talked about.
We did tips. We talked about first baseman that got drunk going out to get a Major League Baseball to get a lottery ticket. You got popped for a drink, driving drunk.
But we had two trials. One was Don Marsh is a member of the family that his father started Marsh Supermarkets in Yorktown, Indiana, I believe it was. And then his father was killed in a plane crash in the late 1950s. Don was a student, as I read his biography, or autobiography, I forget which it was, or it was like a history of Marsh when I was working at Purdue University at the Krannert Library. And Don was a student at Michigan State and dropped out of school, as I understand, to work in the family business, and built Marsh up to where they were doing things that were innovative in the grocery industry. But it was a privately owned and privately run business. And so I think he got used to the idea of it's family owned, family run. Okay, we've got jets that we own. so I'm going to take the jet and fly to like Alaska for a salmon fishing trip. And then they went public, and a Florida company bought them out. And I don't think he understood what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
It meant that he no longer owned the company, and he couldn't just do what he wanted to. That company has filed suit against him in the United States District Court. The trial is being held this week. They're seeking compensation from him, in part because they got nailed on taxes because they wrote off a lot of his trips that he took, and the IRS disallowed those deductions, and they were penalized.
I don't know how much of the coverage you've read, Mark, but part of the defense was that some of these trips, the trips were necessary for the business, but I'm not sure how the trips to go see your mistress is necessarily for the business.
Well, then,
I guess it keeps you happy.
Well, he was smiling in all those ads.
So what you're saying is that there was a trial that was going on, that this company was trying to recover monies that they were claiming that he had spent on personal things.
Yes.
For trips, to things for like to see his mistress and such. And his defense
take
was
them
that
with
they
him.
were, and his defense was that these expenditures that he had made was that they were not entitled to reimbursement because they were work-related types of expenses.
One.
And
two, they were ratified because everybody, even after the company took over, and he was continuing.
why don't you first back up and explain for people who aren't lawyers what you mean by ratified?
Oh, okay. Well, in other words, the company that took over Marsh knew what he was doing and didn't do anything about it. They let him go ahead and do it because they knew that he was flying different places, and they knew that he was, going salmon fishing and going to meet. I think he met Castro at one point. At another point, he met Muammar Gaddafi. George Will was here in Indianapolis, and Marsh said, I think it was yesterday or the day before in testimony, well, he had to get someplace quick, so nobody else had the ability to do it. So I said, you just take my jet, and we'll get you back to D.C. because he had to get back there real quick. And so, so George Will jumps on the jet, and
so this other company that bought them then, because they didn't say anything about it, they didn't object to it, they didn't seek recovery, and by paying those things, then they ratified his action.
Yeah, because in other words, they just kind of put their stamp of approval is what he's saying. They're saying they were unaware of it, one. Two, they had a code of ethics, and day before yesterday in testimony, he said, well, I didn't know that. That's the first time that I've seen this. And then
That was the document that has signature on it.
Yes, I mean there was a bunch of stuff where it's like I think he was oblivious after a certain point. He was enjoying the fruits, as it were, of being the former CEO and having all this money, and he still thought he could play and enjoy it and have fun with
But
life.
should he have known? Isn't that important?
I think that he's an adult. He's running a business, and when you go public, in other words, you're selling stock of a privately held company, there's a whole different set of rules on that. Mm-hmm. And if he wasn't savvy enough in business to realize that he needed to sit down with his lawyers and talk about what those ramifications were, then he was kind of dumb as a big business owner, and so he should have. I mean, ignorance of the law is no excuse, only when it's malum prohibitum, just because you say it's wrong. When it has to do with like spending other people's money, like here, and he counterclaimed. He's suing the Florida company because they refused to pay him like $2 or $3 million in severance and other payments once he left Marsh, and so it's like they're suing each other back and forth. But I don't think it looks good for him because at the same time as he's trying to get this money, but it's all coming out about like these girlfriends that he had, and it just doesn't. I don't think that a jury is going to feel warm and fuzzy thinking that he got off bad when he's had so much fun.
And it's a civil trial, so all they have to do is tip the scales.
Yeah, they just have to prove more likely than not that it's true, except as to proof for punitive damages, because they're trying to establish punitive damages. And does that go to a standard of clear and convincing evidence?
I'm not aware that there's a different standard for that. Maybe there is.
I'm just asking because I thought that if you're going for punitive damages and trying to establish, I know that it is for fraud. If there would be some kind of fraud element, it's a higher standard of proof.
It might be if you're going against the government. No, you can't get punitive against government.
Isn't that what they're claiming, though, is a fraud?
It might be, or a theft of some kind of conversion. And if it is, then there might, but that's in federal court, and they're using Indiana's substantive law, though.
Right. So I mean, I don't know what's been charged here, but if you do a conversion, I don't know why they'd go after punitives, because you get 3 times your damages on a conversion anyway.
Yes.
They're
so.
going for traps. I think that the paper, the IBJ, the Indianapolis Star actually is covering this one. I think they might have gotten their terms wrong, because they were talking about punitive damages when they meant trebs. But the other trial at the same time. Now this is front page in Indianapolis, and you've got the picture of smiling Don Marsh on the front page of the Indianapolis Star every day. At the same time, that's really not involved. That doesn't involve people as much as the trial of John Bales and William Spencer in U.S. District Court in South Bend this week, because Paul knows more about Mr. Bales in terms of his background, but I need to just stop right now and just remind our listeners, you're listening to Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Ogden.
And we are streaming to you live over Indiana Talks. Indiana Talks is a network of talk shows on the internet that are based or originate from Indiana. Gary Snyder in Marion started this, and I would suggest you go to the Indiana Talks website. If you do, there's a little button there. It says Donate. Press the Donate button, and if you can, donate so that Gary can purchase hardware and software so that this network can be furthered. We have our own equipment, and we don't necessarily agree with the views or philosophies of people on other shows, but it certainly furthers First Amendment and rights of free expression and stuff like that, which is altogether good. And we're coming to you from Broad Ripple. It's on the north side of Indianapolis on a beautiful February 9, 2013. Paul Ogden, how are you today?
I'm doing fine, Mark. How you doing?
Doing well. Paul and I co-host this show, and I was, instead of saying I'm Mark Small and you say
I'm Paul Ogden.
yeah, I screwed up on that. That's
I screw up a lot.
yeah, I know you screw up all the time. You're a Republican, Paul.
Yeah.
Our guests today are Pat Andrews. Pat is a blogger on Had Enough Indiana, former candidate for the Democratic Party for City County Council here in Indianapolis, and she blogs a lot about taxation issues, particularly, and municipal finance. Would that be accurate for me to say that?
Probably good government. I would
Good government?
summarize.
You're not for
that.
bad government?
Generally, no. Sometimes.
Okay.
It's more
All right.
fun.
And our other guest panelist today is Karen Celestino Horseman. Karen is an attorney here in Indianapolis, former Democratic City County Councilor here in Marion County. And Karen, welcome back. You've both been on the show before.
Right.
So this is it's a wonderful day, and we're sitting here talking about various issues. And the next one that we're
Okay, before we move off of Don Marsh, can I say something? I thought, watching this with Don Marsh, that it also has an element of tragedy to it. Because Don Marsh was a figure that goes back a long way. He is a figure that goes back a long way in the Indianapolis community. I mean, his face is known to people because of the commercials that he did.
yeah, because he did quite a few television commercials for Marsh.
Right, and I mean, in the Marsh family, the Marsh stores, all of that is so well known. And when they sold to Florida, I think everybody kind of thought it was kind of a passing of, here's a family-owned thing in Indiana, Hoosier-owned enterprise.
I still don't understand why they sold.
Well, and I think a lot of people wondered that. And so now to see, and at that time when they went through the sale, we've been kind of watching them build up to this point of this trial, so that now we see I think it's rather sad, because here is a family name that was once very proud and had reason to be proud. Here is an individual who was really well regarded in our community. And we have now witnessed firsthand his fall and all the steps that went along the way. I think from Mrs. Marsh to, his wife, you see this parade of women that he supposedly had all these affairs
Yeah,
with.
but is that his first wife?
I don't know, but any wife, all I can say is, don't ever think about cheating on me, anybody. So, I mean, but.
You'd rethink your position on guns at that point.
Well, it's just,
That's right.
I look at it and say, yes, it's sad that, I don't see why he sold Marsh to begin with, but on the other hand, I can't feel that the person is very tragic when he basically was a dog. And he's out there, he's got like 5 mistresses that they've counted so far. Now, I'm sorry to sound cynical, but I'd hazard to guess that if there were 5 that they've established in court he's had relations with, there were probably more out there. And he seems like a congenial, jovial fellow, but he doesn't look like an Adonis. And he suffered this tragedy in private jets flying to like Milan, Italy, and Paris, and places in the Orient. So
I didn't say, though, that he was the tragic figure.
Hoosiers are.
Yeah, I mean, look at it. You know, here we had somebody who came, a Hoosier family, that came from very little, built up this huge company, had this success, had a well-known name and all of that, and then we kind of watch, you know, as generations pass now, this dream, this American dream family. I mean, that was the American dream at the time. Now just kind of crash and burn.
Well, but it wasn't so much that he got this from his father. He took over the family business after his father's death. He actually built up the business himself.
Mm-hmm.
And then, for whatever reason, decided to go public. Probably had somebody say, well, you can get a real big, on an initial public offering on this store, you could probably get a whole bunch of money. And nobody told him the downside to that. It's like, if they want you to stay on after you've taken that big IPO, step out. You just got a big chunk of change. You can buy your private jet, and if you do things right, you can just do whatever you want.
Are you sure it was taken public or it was just sold?
It was sold. I believe it went public because that was how the Florida company bought it.
Okay.
Because all of a sudden they were able to purchase Marsh, and I never understood that. So I, you know, it's one of those things where I understand there are downsides to it, and you can feel sorry for him in a lot of ways. But he's a very wealthy man. I haven't heard that he lost any of his wealth, and apparently his wife was tolerant of this stuff, and so their private life is whatever their private life is. But I can understand that there's an element of that's too bad. I thought it was too bad that they sold the business to begin with.
Well, yeah, we all, you know, it was a Hoosier thing.
Plus, they sold it to a company that's known to strip down businesses that they buy and then turn around and sell them.
Right.
It's kind of been a surprise they haven't turned around and sold them.
And that brings me to something that I was wondering this week, and this is kind of off topic, but I don't care.
Yeah, since when has that stopped you?
Yeah, I know. Investment bankers, hedge fund managers. Why do hedge fund people get a tax loophole where they pay a reduced income tax rate? Maybe that's a rhetorical question. That's encouraging behavior in the economic sphere that we would rather discourage, because you're talking about people that go around and strip businesses, just like you talked about Sun Foods from Florida is the one that bought out Marsh. Why would we you presumably put tax breaks into the code to benefit people to encourage behavior?
I'm not sure what tax breaks you're talking about.
Hedge fund managers pay a lower
You're
income
talking about
tax.
passive income, they do pay. Everybody pays a lower.
Yeah, but
tax
it's
rate.
specific to hedge fund people.
Okay, I'm not sure what tax you're talking about. I think Pat had something to add to it.
Or is it maybe the thinking is that they streamline the economic system?
Well, in the
But nonetheless, they probably have lobbyists, and that's how everything gets done. So it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't know that just things are actually justified in a pure intellectual fashion as far as promoting positive behaviors and discouraging negative behaviors. It's more who's got the lobbyists at the right time in the right place.
Well, I think Scrooge said it in A Christmas Carol when he says we reduce the surplus population. I mean, he was talking about, poor people in the streets. But, when you're talking about hedge fund managers, when they come into some of these places, they strip them down. They're taking over a business that's otherwise profitable. They will take out loans on that business.
I don't know about that.
But we
Otherwise,
allow
profit.
companies to shelter monies overseas. And there's a lot of things that our tax codes favor that aren't favorable to our economy here.
And I think at the end, Marsh was starting to struggle right before they sold. I don't think it was doing as well as it as once was. I'm not 100% sure, but that's my memory of it.
Well,
So,
I didn't notice that. I've noticed lately, though, that they've replaced cashiers with automatic things you just have to scan. And
then they don't work, and you have to go find somebody to fix it. I know, I've been through that. You want to talk about John Bales?
yeah, I sure do.
Okay, John
Paul,
Bales.
Yeah, explain to the folks who...
John Bales is a real estate broker, and commercial real estate broker. He has a company called Venture Real Estate. He got and one thing that's often overlooked is he got a monopoly contract, a privatization contract, to buy and sell buildings on behalf of the state of Indiana, and buy and sell property on behalf of the state of Indiana. That's one thing that gets overlooked. Should we be giving these people monopoly contracts? Because they end up in a lot of problems. But he, in the course of doing his work, DCS, Department of Child Services. Okay.
Yeah.
Did I say that right? Okay.
Yes.
I use DCS all the time. Sometimes I forget what it stands for. Anyway, but DCS needed a new building up in Elkhart. He let a attorney from Indianapolis know about that, Paul Page. Said, hey, you can make money off this building. And Paul Page went to the bank, went to Huntington National Bank, and said, I need a loan to buy this building. And whenever you do a transaction that's financed, and you have to put down a down payment, you can't borrow the down payment. The down payment you can't lie to the lender about where the down payment is coming from. And I've done real estate closings. If you see, if someone is coming to buy property and they said, "Oh, my parent is giving me the money for the down payment," that's a red flag. And in this case, some of the down payment money actually came from John Bales through another entity that he had.
All of it.
I don't think I don't believe it's all of it, but I'm not 100% sure of that. Anyway, but the money came from another entity that John Bales had. They had an entity called BAB, then they had LBAB. Mark might know better.
L and L ampersand BAB.
Yeah, and that was Paul Page's company.
Yeah, and Bales had given it that acronym to stand for lazy and broke ass bitch.
Because he was all the time talking about Bales, how you don't have any money and you're just broke. And Bales is a prominent defense attorney in Indianapolis. Page, thank you. Anyway, so this came out eventually. Apparently, Paul Page then borrowed money against the property. There was a falling out between Bales and Page, and it came to the attention of the venture real estate controller that this money was out there, and they said, "Oh, we need to put a mortgage on this property to protect it." So the question was it a loan, or was Bales an equity owner in it? Was he just loaning money, which might be a violation of the agreement with the bank, but not necessarily criminal, or did he in fact give this money with the intention of getting profit from the building?
And the jury weighed in on the question at about 5:30 on Thursday evening and decided that the United States government had not proven beyond a reasonable doubt on any one of the 11 counts that any criminal wrongdoing was committed by either Mr. Bales or Mr. Spencer.
And one of the things I'm sure played well with the jury is the bank, even if you do something wrong in a mortgage transaction, like you say you're going to occupy property to get a lower interest rate, but then you don't occupy the property. As long as you're making payments, the bank generally doesn't care. And I don't think they proved that the bank didn't care.
In fact, neither the bank nor the state of Indiana lost money.
Right.
So there was no harm to anyone from that standpoint. But also, the defense cross-examined one of the government's witnesses who had been involved in advising the government on it. And he was former. He worked for DCS, the Department of Child Services, as counsel, and he testified that he had advised Spencer at one point that maybe they should run this by one of the government attorneys to see if it was okay.
And there was some conflict within state government over what was going on.
Yeah.
Not just that project, but others, and they were at crosshairs.
What you've all just said is kind of interesting, because what you basically have said is that what the state or what the federal government was trying to claim was a crime had been committed, although there was no victim, there was nothing, no damage done. That's a hard case to make. I mean, when you said earlier, you said, well, if you don't have all the money when you go and enter a mortgage, then it's a problem. I think maybe we need to explain that the reason why it's considered to be a problem is because you are required to put the money up front, and you cannot get a loan unless you get it approved by the bank, because the bank wants to make certain that you have enough invested in this project that you'll continue to make your payments and all of that, and that you
Or financially sound.
and are financially sound. That's part of their whole thing in
Right.
lending you the money.
Very big.
I think that what the aim was to point out that there was an ethical conflict that shouldn't have occurred, that the state law wants their hands to be clean and not to be getting side profits beyond arranging real estate for government offices to occupy. And what Bale's documents seem to suggest, some of which were not introduced to the jury, but seem to suggest that he may have had an equity position in this building and was going to make money off the sale of it, because now there's $250,000 a year in lease payments that were guaranteed for 10 years or so. But still, that is a public issue, and it's important for the public trust in government that when we have these walls up, that those walls are in fact maintained, and that people aren't, using the system to make more money off their knowledge of what the government is doing, because they're the ones doing it for the government.
But you just pointed out, Pat, maybe inadvertently, as to what the other problem with the federal prosecutor's case was. You said that this was to show up that an ethical problem. That's for the state to bring. This was a criminal case. If there was an ethical violation, then the state needed to bring it. And that's the other part of this, which I hadn't thought of, which is that the state didn't take any action. I mean, the bank didn't take any action because it didn't care. The state didn't take any action because it didn't perceive there was an ethical violation or anything wrong had been done.
Well, that's not evidence.
Yes, it is evidence.
They didn't take
I don't
any
know if
action, but the Department
I think they eventually
of Administration
got rid of it.
specifically told them they could not do this.
But they didn't see it as an ethical violation.
They didn't know it had happened until the
But they
IBJ
knew
broke
it,
the story.
and the IBJ broke it, and they could still bring an ethical complaint at that time and still
Well, I
call
guess
for an
they
ethical
still can.
investigation.
I don't think
didn't.
Venture Real Estate is active anymore as an agent for the state.
Well,
Yeah.
but here's one aspect of that whole equation. The United States Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Indiana, because the President of the United States is a member of the Democratic Party, is a Democratic appointee, whereas the state machinery for bringing charges, either, we have an Indiana Attorney General, and presumably the Indiana Attorney General or
He can't bring charges.
well,
charges.
Secretary of State can for something if it involves securities.
I don't think criminal. There's very limited.
They can
very,
do,
very limited.
the Secretary
That's
of
why
State can.
this way you have the county prosecutor, Elkhart County, could have, if they had filed, if the state had gone to him and said, this has happened, then that county prosecutor is the one who's charged with filing the criminal charges.
I thought it was the Marion County prosecutor that did the state stuff.
Well, no,
No.
it depends upon the nature
Right.
of the
Yeah.
prosecution. And so, presumably, Marion County prosecutor
Marion County can
could have,
prosecute the state. It can
Well,
go against the state.
or if someone's
And do things.
based here.
One thing that's important to point out, when you talk about complicated financial crimes, complicated real estate transactions, they're way over the head of most county prosecutors. They simply do not have the resources or the understanding. And I got into this when I was head of the title insurance division, trying to get something done about real estate fraud is very difficult, because the feds won't go after them unless it's a lot of money. The state won't go after them because they don't understand it. And I made the recommendation they ought to let people get appointed that are just to be deputy prosecutors around the state, just to prosecute those kind of crimes.
To privatize it?
And
No, privatize.
And you just, but see, then that shows that's another strike against the feds case, because you're exactly right. On these financial cases, they are difficult. They're difficult to present. They're difficult for a jury that may have absolutely no background in finance or anything to understand.
Yeah, because once they would have said, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what we're discussing here is an IT-47C investment scam. We need to break just for a second. This is Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Ogden.
And we are streaming to you live over Indiana Talks. If you go to indianatalks.com, a marvelous network of Indiana-based talk shows, there's a little button there. It says donate. You can hit that and donate money to Indiana Talks. We don't get any of it. It doesn't go to our equipment or software. It goes
to Don Marsh.
Don Marsh Legal Defense Fund.
And we'll wire him money in Waikiki. It goes to Indiana Talks so they can buy hardware and software to further the First Amendment and people broadcasting over Indiana Talks. It's on Live 365. You can watch this on civildiscoursenow.com, because if you're listening to this on Indiana Talks or on Live 365, you're not seeing it. And we are video. We do have video.
We're quite good looking, too, Mark.
Well, I am, but I don't know. But we're and certainly our guests. But it's like you can watch this on video, and we've been doing video for 2 years. So we've got a backlog of past shows you can watch. I
have a point to make, assuming you're done with that transition. But regarding something Pat said,
and then I've got something to say about what something you said. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, no, Pat brings up a good point. It doesn't have to be a criminal prosecution. Criminal, you have a whole different standard of proof and everything. Civilly, they could have pursued bails and said, "Give me this money back," or eventually they did have the contract canceled. There were things that the state could have done outside of a criminal prosecution. Criminal prosecutions, when you're talking about financial crimes, are very difficult because people have trouble understanding them. But there are things that the state could have done, or things the Attorney General could have done in terms of pursuing the state's interest in this.
Well, and on top of that, a pivotal person in any criminal prosecution is the lead investigator from the case, because he or she is going to be the person who's telling the story. And that's whenever you go to legal seminars, they say you want to paint a picture for the story. And so you're telling them a story, kind of like telling a story to a 6-year-old about certain aspects of finance or something. But in this case, the lead special agent from the FBI joined the FBI in 2005, was noticeably nervous on the stand, and it was his first white-collar case to go to trial, and his first time testifying in a criminal case.
I thought that was interesting, yeah.
And so who's the defense counsel, lead defense counsel? He's a former U.S. attorney who prosecuted Timothy McVeigh. So he has some experience in this stuff. In the first day of trial, he'd been yelling at a witness, and during the beginning of his cross-examination of the FBI agent then, he jokingly asked him not to start talking in Spanish or Portuguese, languages the guy had learned as an agent, and the agent came back and said, "If you promise not to yell at me." Now, if I'm not seeing this anywhere, but having done these cases before juries, when somebody drops a line like that from the defense counsel, usually there's a smattering of laughter in the courtroom. Laughter in a courtroom is not good for the prosecution, because that kind of downplays the seriousness of what is going on. And having read that and realizing how complicated this whole thing was and how they excluded from evidence, excluded from the jury considering a lot of the emails that had gone back and forth, I was reading that thinking, how many minutes is it going to take for them to acquit? Because their legal team did, it looks like an excellent job.
You know, Larry Mackey of Barnes and Thornburg, and Buddy Pilot was lucky to have Larry take the lead on it. Larry's an excellent attorney, and you know, I just think that there's the other part of all of this is that I'm not quite understanding because and I'm not part of this, so I don't know what the decision was in the Northern District is handling the Bales thing, just this one venture on Elkhart. There are apparently some other things that were involved. Southern District, according to the deal that Paul Page made, is going to be investigating other parts of it. I don't know why this house wasn't built together.
Well, and that's an interesting point that they gave a plea deal to Paul Page in return for his testimony. Paul Page did not testify in this trial. And
which I think the jury's going to sit there and wonder why he isn't.
Well, but if the jury isn't told he's not... I mean,
But his name's coming
Which
up
is
all
they
the
know
time.
that they know all about it.
I
Exactly.
know.
I agree with Paul that the jury's going to wonder that. Why isn't he here?
And people can sit there and say, well, why did he ever even bother to plead guilty then? That was a blown call for him just to plead guilty when he could have possibly walked away like they did. Two things. One, you don't know the evidence was against him. Two, Bob Hammerly's his attorney. Bob's one of the best criminal defense attorneys in the state. So if he pled and he took a deal then to go through a syllogism with Bob Hammerly as his counsel, there was a good reason, and that was a good deal. So that means that another shoe or two is or are going to drop as a result of this, and then one begins to wonder...
Even
Well, why
good-
do you think he was not called to testify in this case? Because that does seem odd.
Yeah.
Because it had to have been, and maybe I'm wrong about this, it had to have been that the U.S. government felt that his testimony, especially under the withering fire of Mackey's cross-examination, would be of detriment to the government's case.
But
Well,
Paul
and
Page
it-
is an attorney. I would think he could stand up to questioning.
Well, but I think part of it might have been, like I said, I don't know all the ins and outs of this. It's a complicated case. But I think part of that may have been is that they were charging Bales and Spencer for holding an undisclosed ownership interest in the building. Paul Page had pled guilty to using the wire transfers to put the money in there for him to buy the building. Those are not mutually exclusive charges. And if Paul Page had taken the stand and said this was a loan, then, and I don't know what he allocuted to for his guilty plea, allocution being where you stand up there and admit to certain facts. If he took the stand and said it was a loan, the prosecution's case against those guys.
And it's the same
Would
thing.
have been a
The
real-
bank is the victim, and they don't care.
Right.
All they care is are they getting their payment.
And I just want to make sure everybody out there knows, I am against banks being victimized. That's one of the worst things that can happen in our society. The large banks like this poor Huntington Bank or J.P. Morgan Chase. J.P. Morgan, one of the most deeply humane,
Another
noble
proud
people.
family name.
I mean, and Chase. I mean,
You know, Mark, people don't get sarcasm anymore. They're people
who said I was being
are
sarcastic?
listening. Are listening.
I love those banks.
People
I
listening are
love
thinking,
you.
Mark Small's for big banks.
No, I love the big banks. I
Yes,
think they're
they're
marvelous.
listening now,
They're
so.
just really, they're corporate. And
Yeah.
hi, Hal. Hal, are you out there?
Sorry,
But-
Dave.
But you know, I think that you know, maybe the deal trade-off in Page was that they didn't want to put him up there because of that, and then they get the plea deal so that he'll then work with the Southern District on the investigation into Carl Brizzi. But the testimony that I thought was most fascinating was Payne's. Now, Jim Payne was the former juvenile court judge here in Marion County, who became then head of the DCS. Or is that the proper name at the time?
DCS.
DCS, Department of
It
Children's
used to be
Services.
CPS.
Yes. So he takes the stand. He's the last witness that the prosecution calls, and he takes the stand and he talks about what a fine job that Bales and Spencer did in their work in helping to locate a DCS facility in Elkhart. And of course, Bales' defense through the whole thing has been, I did it for the children.
And that's what he said is in tears after the verdict
Right.
came in.
And the very next day, or maybe it was that day, they shut down another building that ventured.
In Kokomo, they condemned,
condemned
Another
DCS.
Bales building that said that...
For DCS.
Was
Right.
it DCS too?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a DCS
Apparently
building
the
in
children
Kokomo.
But so
there
anyway,
understood.
Payne did not have to do that. He didn't, and it really added nothing except for the fact that he was head of this department, and he basically took the stand. And implicit in what he said, although he didn't say it expressly, implicit in what he said was that these two men weren't guilty. So why would now Payne? You know, this whole thing with the Tanjane Bailey and all this. Everybody's speculating that he is going to be a subject of investigation, and whether he's gotten a letter or not, I don't know who's gotten him or anything. But why you would put yourself out there like that, I find it really interesting to think about.
I'm missing. How did he put himself out?
Because he testified on behalf of these guys and said that basically implicit in the testimony was that they didn't do anything wrong.
You might
but
tell
why is
about
it putting
Tajana
himself
Bailey or
out?
Tawana Bailey what happened
What?
with that.
I don't understand why it put Payne in any position.
Because Payne, there's this whole thing, everybody's been talking about, and this is just a matter of opinion. I'm not expressing any kind of facts or anything, but the speculation has long been that Carl Brizzi was investigating the death of a child, Tanjane Bailey. As the Marion County prosecutor, that's where Marion County has the authority to go in and investigate state actions like this. So he was investigating this, and the investigation gets dropped. Carl then gets half interest in this building. They got a contract from DCS for something else, right?
Mm-hmm. I can't remember what. But.
Right. And so all of this then is that Jim Payne is out there now because this was all on his watch. And an investigation would have been involved with him, with the Tanjane Bailey.
And to go back,
One would think.
Well,
What
explain
happened-
that,
what
Glenn.
happened-
Well, one would think though that would be a case management level issue rather than.
No, the thing was that what they're saying is it was a quid pro quo.
Oh no,
People
no,
are
I understand the
speculating
Brincy
that, yeah.
part and
the-
his
and the-
culpability.
and Payne.
What happened
Yes.
with Tajana Bailey?
But why?
What
I guess I don't
remind-
understand.
she
Payne.
died.
Yes. Tanjane Bailey died
I know,
supposedly
I know,
through the
I know.
neglect of the DCS.
Yeah, but whether that would be some kind of criminal action against the director, I don't know.
Yeah.
well, and the thing about, in terms of why wouldn't they use Page, in terms of, well, it's also an analogy could be drawn, I don't know, to, baseball. Let's say that you're in a 4-game series and you need your pitcher for the 4th game. You're not this one pitcher, you're not going to trot him out for the 3rd and 4th game. And if they had adduced testimony from Paul Page in the Northern District on this case, they might have given up, had him out there, he would have given prior testimony for a prior statement to use against him in cross-examination for any trial that would have taken place in the Southern District, and they might value the case that they have in the Southern District more than the
Possibly,
Northern
but,
District.
but juries want to know things. They sit there and they speculate, okay, you're talking about this Paul Page guy, when are you going to call him? And then you never call him.
So is that...
And that just really looks bad.
Gary Welsh in Vance, Indiana says that the prosecution blew it in this case. That's his assessment.
Well, I think there might have been, first of all, the civil angle. I mean, there were things the state of Indiana could have done. And if there were other things maybe they could have gone after Bales for instead of this complicated situation. But whether they blew it or not, I don't know. I wasn't there to watch all the testimony. I read the IBJ coverage. And not calling, if you're going to be in a position where you're not calling Paul Page, I think you've got a big problem.
Yeah, because that's... and you're right, mentioning him all over the place.
Yeah.
Although I love big banks.
Yes.
I love big banks.
Talk about some other issues, Mike?
Yeah, we've got a development that's been going on, and there's a development here. First of all, this gets into the idea of what a TIF is. But I think this comes within the TIF. They're building, they propose to build a combination coffee shop, brew pub, was some kind of outdoor venue on Winthrop Avenue, just south of 54th Street here in Indianapolis. Now that area is just south of Broad Ripple. Broad Ripple is ambiguously defined. It used to be a specific village on the north side of Indianapolis. Now, if you're talking to somebody from another part of the state, they think Broad Ripple is kind of like the north side of the city. If you're talking about people from the city,
Wow.
they think it's kind of like the northeast side of the city. If you're from Broad Ripple, it runs from 54th to the river on the north, and from the west, technically College Avenue, all the way to Keystone Avenue on the east. So this is just south of 54th, or in other words, Sobro, South Broad Ripple. And the area is about a one-block area of a former, I think, lumberyard was there or something, construction supply place. It was converted into like an exercise fitness place at one point. It's got got graffiti spray painted on it and stuff. There was a development proposed by people. One developer is from Westfield or has a place in Westfield, and another guy was also from Carmel. Neither of them is from here, and they're wanting to put this place into a neighborhood. The outdoor venue would seat up. Originally, it was planned to seat up to 1,000 people.
You cut that back to 600.
600.
650.
They also put in another provision because a lot of the neighbors there were opposed to it and upset with the idea of this development going in. And I lived in Chicago. I can tell you that Wrigley Field draws like 39,000 people for a night game. And a lot of people were opposed to the idea of a night game at Wrigley for other reasons, philosophical. I didn't the neighborhood things. So what? Like the philosophical thing of day games. Because people at night coming back from a baseball game, it's like 10 at night. They're doing what people do coming home from a baseball game,
And drinking too much beer.
Yeah, and they have to relieve themselves. So, amongst other things. So, folks in that area were upset with the idea that this venue was going in. So, the developers proposed that they cut back on the amount of parking on the street. They agreed to cut back on the number of people allowed in the venue. It'd be 600 instead of 1,000. They agreed to not have amplified sound, but it's for like a 1-year trial period or
I
something.
wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
I watched the zoning here. I didn't hear
I
them
didn't
say it was
see
a
that
one.
in the staff
Yeah, I didn't
report.
either.
There was some. Now you've read a report on it.
I
Pat?
scanned through it this morning,
Yeah.
but there was no mention of a 1 year. It was a
It's important to know.
commitment.
Important to note too. It backs up to the Monon.
Yeah, the Monon is used to be a train line. It runs south to north. It was converted in 96, 97 to a greenway so that they put asphalt paving down in place of the rail bed. And people jog, bike, all sorts of stuff on the Monon. It's also traffic for people at night to commit crime because people...
We're not supposed to be on it at night. They talked about changing that rule. I don't think they have. That you're not supposed to be on it after dark.
Well, you shouldn't be.
Well, it just makes sense.
I mean, there's no
People
lighting
can
on
jump
it.
out at any point
Well, I know,
and
but
mug you.
So when you say that they made these commitments, were these commitments negotiated with the neighborhood?
Well,
staff report never reflects that. The neighborhood may have been involved. It wasn't.
Did
The
the
is
staff
it the
definitely was.
Meridian Castle Neighborhood Association? And someone was saying, and I believe it's true, that one of the members of the Meridian Kessler is actually on the one of the investors or something.
Yeah, but if the neighborhood association was Meridian Kessler, then I assume they didn't oppose it.
They did it first. I think.
It was
They
denied
changed.
But they
by the hearing examiner,
Uh-huh.
appealed by the
Mm-hmm.
petitioner. Now, all I read was the staff report,
Mm-hmm.
which won't
Yeah.
reflect anything about the neighborhood.
So did the
association.
neighborhood oppose it or not?
there are people in the neighborhood who opposed it.
Right. And if you look at the zone, I don't know if you all got a chance to see the zoning hearing, but the zoning hearing had quite a number of people, including the former councilwoman, president when they were in the minority, who's
Joanne Sanders?
Joanne Sanders. spoke against it, and there were a lot of people who spoke against
Well,
it.
And so what about John Barth? Isn't that his area, Meridian
I don't
Kessler?
think well,
He's
he
at
was.
large now.
He
Yeah, but I
Father
mean that's where he
Tarkington.
lives. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
Father
I
Tarkington,
didn't-
that's right.
they had Gooden spoke for it apparently.
For
Will Gooden.
Well,
who was
Will
a-
Gooden is counselor for our
Right,
area.
right, but I don't
And
know.
he came
that
out in
John
support of
Barth
it?
did. Yes, he did.
Yeah. Now, here's from urbanindy.com. Kevin, is this the same Kevin Kastner that was in law school with us?
I don't remember.
I mean, Kevin Kastner was ABA moot court team coach when I was on the ABA moot court national team,
All right.
but,
I don't remember
Aren't
that.
you
Uh,
special?
of which I later was coach.
Oh.
So that was, but if it is,
It's been all downhill since then, Mark.
you're just a real pip there,
Yeah.
Paul. It says here in this summary, the proposal, this was posted on the 17th, the proposal has taken yet another step towards satisfying some vocal opponents. According to Misha Rabinovich, the attorney for the proposal, the project has been downsized again. Here are the details relayed to Mr. Kastner by Mary Owens from the Meridian Kessler Neighborhood Association. So apparently the Neighborhood Association is at least supportive enough to provide communication in this means. Revised site plan significantly reducing the size of the outdoor space and increasing the amount of on-site parking to 79 from 54 spaces. Identifying the parking along Winthrop Avenue as parallel parking, which eliminates the need for a variance related to parking along Winthrop Avenue. Removing the concepts of pre-ticketed concerts and special events, such that the maximum capacity at all times is 600, with 350 seats inside, 150 outside, with some potential for standing room, and then a 1-year trial run commitment with respect to outdoor amplified sound.
What is they? A 1-year trial run commitment?
In other words,
Right.
after a year, they're going to have amplified sound.
Right.
That may
yeah,
be
they get
dated.
That was not reflected in the staff
They may
report.
have that may be dated. I don't know what you're reading, but it might be dated.
Everything's dated. This is
Yeah,
this
I
is
meant
dated
dated as an old
January
It's
17th.
been changed.
So what is your whole point about bringing all this up?
Well, because some people were opposed to it.
Yeah, I think it raises a bigger issue. What do you want to do with the Monon? Is the Monon is a linear park, or are we going to start allowing development all up and down the Monon, so that it just becomes a sidewalk from one business to another?
Yeah, is it an exercise trail, or is it a means by which commerce flourishes?
Why are the two mutually exclusive?
It has to do, from everything I've heard over the years, about how much green space is left intact and how encroaching a business bar can be right on the Monon.
But how
And
much?
that's been the rub that I've seen between neighborhoods and developers. Like a developer want patio seating right on the Monon for their bar, and the neighbors want to keep more of the greenery to keep it more of a pleasant.
And that was the issue with the Krogers
Native.
too going on.
Kroger got a special treatment
Yeah.
and got special land.
I mean, it's really nice to get on there and ride and be like you're out in the
During
country.
their zoning of the Kroger, they knew they didn't have enough land to provide adequate drainage for the parcel
Mhm.
and the development, and the city ended up giving them that land
Well.
out of the Mona.
Well,
So it's an important tension that's been going on.
It's going to
And
get
it's going
worse.
to continue to
Yeah.
go on, but the trouble is you get these piecemeal, instead of having an overarching
Urban plan.
well, not just, well, we have plans, we never stick to them. But when you get through the BZA, when you get this piecemeal
BZA is
Board of Zoning Appeals for where variances go instead of rezonings. So there's supposed to be small changes. Then when you get a piecemeal approach without an overarching policy framework,
What's
then,
the con-
then it's hard because then you get, 2 miles up the way, you let a bar have
Kilroy's.
well, I'm just saying, the precedent gets set in one spot for whatever reasons, and then it's used in another spot, and you end up with this designed encroachment, and then the whole concept of the Monon changes to the sidewalk alley between the backs of businesses.
And this is, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Karen, just a second. This is Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
Paul Ogden?
We are streaming to you live on Saturday, February 9th from Broad Ripple. It's on the north side of Indianapolis. We are coming to you on Live 365 and also on IndianaTalks.com. Indiana Talks is basically a network. I hate it when people start sentences by saying, well, basically. Okay. It's a network of Indiana-based talk shows that was started by Gary Snyder, and there are about a dozen other shows that are on this network, including Civil Discourse Now. We don't necessarily agree with the philosophy of most of the shows. Actually, most of the shows probably don't agree with my philosophy. That's beside the point. They're
Certainly
wrong.
true.
Who cares? I mean, Paul's wrong too. But you can go onto their website, and there's a Donate Now button. Hit that button, and you can donate to IndianaTalks.com, and that enables Gary Snyder to purchase more equipment, more software for the network. We have our own equipment that we use. Our guests today are Pat Andrews, who blogs on Had Enough Indy and was a candidate for City County Council for the Democratic Party here in Indianapolis, and also Karen Celestino Horseman, who's an attorney here in Indianapolis and who was a City County Councilor here in Indianapolis, Democratic Party. And we were talking about development of the Bent Rail Brewery and Coffee Company. I like it. It says in the Sobro area. It's like, we're like coming on with acronyms and nicknames and things like New York and stuff. And it's an area that's about a block, a block-sized area that's next to, immediately bordering the Monon Trail, just south of 54th Street. And that area that block is being let go to seed. I mean, nobody's really done anything with it for a while. And so they're coming in with this restaurant, brew pub, coffee place. It's supposed to be family-oriented, and I'm sorry, but I don't like having drinks and stuff where there are a lot of kids running around. So I've never understood that concept. But anyways.
Well, before we get to Karen, one thing to point out about the development, there are people there that testified. They said this is not blighted. So I don't know. Yeah, you didn't use the word blighted, but there were people there neighbors who didn't think it was blighted. But I think Karen had a point.
Well, I just had a question, and Pat won't know this because she knows all things about comprehensive plan. But we have a comprehensive plan process here in the state of Indiana where the neighborhood community is supposed to come together and they draft up a comprehensive plan where their vision is for an area as far as zoning and such as that's part of their community. What does the comprehensive plan call for on the lands adjacent to the Monon Trail?
I'm not sure how that goes. I think the Monon is part of the greenways, and that has its own plan.
Right.
So the dynamic is, say you want to build a 4-story apartment building, and using the Monon's vista as your sales point. How close should you be able to go to the Monon Trail, and how many trees should you be able to cut down to get your building pad in? Those questions
aren't answered by the comprehensive plan.
I do not know what the comprehensive plan says, and on that whole length of how many miles is the Monon?
Depends upon where you're saying it ends, because it goes all the way up to Noblesville.
Westfield, not Noblesville. It's a different.
Well, say in Marion County, where
downtown,
we're more familiar. Say 15 miles would be
unreasonable.
But so there might be differences in plans because they're said. Although it's supposed to be a unified plan, that goes through many jurisdictions. But the Greenways plan is not being enforced either. And we all know that the problem with the plans is it keeps us all busy. Oh my gosh, we had how many years of putting that last plan together? 5 years? Yeah. And you have to have a thing on the billboard, digital billboard.
I was just thinking about that.
Okay, so but you
That's
know,
a
so
good-
it shows the community's interest and the community's vision, and the people are talking,
Well,
not the developers, not the out of towners who want to make a buck. You know, it's the people talking through the plans, and then when you get to the boards and to the zoning commission, the comprehensive plans get mentioned, but they're often ignored.
Well, but see, here's
And which is very bad, you know, because, well, I don't know if you want to get into this at this point, but Karen knows where I'm going with all of it, and you guys are the lawyers, but the underpinnings for any zoning, the underpinnings for building codes, the underpinnings for any of that
It's
stuff
money.
comes from a comprehensive plan that shows a community interest that outweighs an individual's property rights.
Oh, okay.
And so when the comprehensive plan gets done, it's done because it has to be done. And then when it's ignored is when the whole thing gets turned upside down. And it irritates me because of the hours that so many good people put into getting those plans, debating this block and the next block, and how it should work, and then it gets ignored.
Well,
And that's really what happens.
Well, like downtown where they had the Pan Am Plaza, it was like that one big area, last kind of like green area immediately downtown, and that was the communal interest, was having that, but then the individual was with the Simons, who decided to put their headquarters there.
They were given that property.
I think you got the wrong area.
That's the new Hudnut
Yes.
Park over there.
There was a Pan Am Plaza, but that's a different area.
Okay, but it's just
Right.
but there was like green there between the Marriott and
Yeah.
and
They got rid of that.
They just put
Unfortunately. I want to hear about the digital billboards.
what's going on?
You need to do a whole spiel on this because
Whet our appetite. We'll have
Okay.
another show about it.
Karen was the best counselor ever,
Don't you can.
and
We'll have to edit
it was
Yeah.
at Langsford. The two of you, was it
Yeah.
Langsford?
Yeah. Lance Langsford.
Lance Lansford, the two of them got a moratorium put in through the city county council that no more billboards could be erected, or was it new zoning for billboards?
We did
Well,
all new regulations
until
for zoning
the sign ordinance was updated
Mhm.
For the billboards themselves, and there was a massive group of industry representatives, neighborhood representatives, councilors. You sat on that committee. I don't know how many hours you all put into it, and I was not part of that, but I felt part of it. A billboard ordinance was drafted and approved, and it was all negotiated too, so the industry is part of the process. Now what they've done is mid-term, when Ballard's first term, Chris Cotterill was the chief of staff.
Who's Ballard?
Oh, he's the guy who does all the ribbon cutting, and he goes on these tours around the world.
Okay, because you're not talking about Mayor Vaughn.
No, this is before Mayor Vaughn.
Okay.
I
wanted to clarify that.
This is back when Mayor Ballard was still
This is
considered
Mayor
the
Ballard
mayor.
that Paul worked very hard to get elected.
In 2007, I point out.
But-
It's been an election.
Oh, so you're to blame.
Yes.
The
I am to blame
billboard
for that.
industry contacted Chris Cotterill. And it turns out there's a bunch of billboards that are illegally erected still, because that was not addressed, but it was pointed out to us that they were illegal.
It
and
didn't
the
hit anybody in
billboard-
the face like a billboard.
And the billboard industry at the time was suggesting to Cotterill that if he allowed digital billboards, which were banned under the ordinance drafted by this huge committee, if the city of Indianapolis allowed digital billboards, they'd take down 10 billboards to put one of those digitals up. Okay.
This kind of like sounds like
This
budget
is back-
cutting and
this is
avoiding the
this
fiscal
is the
cliff.
backroom stuff. So Chris Cotterill was doing whatever he was dealing with that. The next we hear of it, there's new counselors, and I want to say Simpson. Who was the other
Aaron
one?
Freeman.
Freeman, who have agreed to sign on to the industry drafted ordinance, but the public will get to
Allowing
kibitz,
digital billboards.
allowing the digital billboards with no 1 for 10 either.
And
Just
why don't you
wherever.
tell us what a digital billboard is?
Those are the ones that are basically big TV screens.
Do they flash?
They can do anything. They can show movies.
Okay.
Yeah, they can do whatever they want. But the digital.
Because
The
I think Broad
technology.
Ripple has one up for their school out here, don't they?
Well, I'll tell you where there's one here. There's one on the fairgrounds. Now, the reason why
Yes.
there's one on the fairgrounds
And
is
it looks
because
well.
it does look terrible, but
It's
it's
on
on the
state
fairground.
property.
It's on state property, and city and state try to avoid litigating. You know, the question's never been answered. Is the state property subject to city zoning laws? And nobody wants to push that issue. Isn't that constitutional thing?
Yeah.
So anyway, that is there. But what they want, if you recall, there was a point in time when Paul Ricketts was still alive and mayor of Lawrence, and he wanted to put two. Now, if you notice 465 around Indianapolis, one of the beautiful things about it is we have hardly any billboards. There's been some that have been grandfathered in, but they're very rare on a 465.
And for anybody listening, 465 goes around Indianapolis like just a square, and during the month of May and right before the Brickyard, traffic gets a little more hectic on there, I think, because people imagine themselves as being in the race. But it's like a clock face.
This is what we use to travel from one, north side of the city down to the south side of the city and all of that. So they wanted, Lawrence had approved for 2 billboards to come in, to be
Digital.
placed, yes, digital billboards to be placed along I-465. So we fought that. The city fought that
And why?
said, well, they were
It's against
saying,
our law to have a digital billboard. Lawrence has its own jurisdiction.
But I mean,
Why?
why are you opposed to free enterprise
This is
going out
sarcasm.
expressing itself electronically out there for people to get access to information so they can buy new products through these billboards?
Well, there's a lot of layers and a lot of answers to that. That's why you need to have a whole thing to be fair. There is, though, the idea of the vista. And when you have a digital billboard, you have a bright light at night, which is not the case with the illuminated traditional billboard, which has its own problems to begin with. You have the flashing that is distracting to a driver when you have any movement. I think it's a biological thing that you're just gonna, if you see something on the corner of your eye move, you're going to look to it, and they play on all that. And there's so it was decided through this community effort that there would be no digital billboards, that there were a degradation of our viewscape in vast summary. There are many reasons why not to have them, but so it was decided, though, by this big community group with all the representatives from all the interested parties.
And now it's been
That is
circumvented.
our law. That is our law.
it's going to be an attempt to be circumvented. They're going to put it, because apparently Joe Simpson and Aaron Freeman like digital billboards. Now,
Because they're American.
because, well, when people think of digital billboards, they think of the very cool Calvin Klein commercials, although nothing quite.
So
was
we're
as
so we're
famous
talking
as
about
them, but you know,
androgynous, semi-nude figures.
well, I'm talking about they think of these very modern, very hip types of advertisements like Times Square. But the thing about digital billboards is that they can play in Times Square because there's not any residents there. It's theater. It's open late. It's
New
supposed
York.
to have. It's supposed to, right? Exactly. Digital billboards in Los Angeles. They have huge digital billboards on the side of a building in certain locations, and they're actually very cool. But again, it's not a residential thing. It's not a, it's getting into all that.
I
But
think also, though, the point is, do you have the industry come into Indianapolis and draft the law, language of a law,
So we're regulated.
or do you go through this group that have representatives from the industry and neighborhoods and the council, all interested party views, brought to the table to hash things out?
Well-
And this approach to have an industry come in and write the language and have it snuck in that way, and the public gets 2-minute drill
It works-
to
it works.
say something different.
The
It works
dog
for
and
the
pony
federal
show.
It works.
Well, but
it works
it's
for the
not
Federal
right.
Reserve.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
you know what? But
Federal
that
Reserve.
I don't think that's as much of the issue though. Because
I think that is an
honestly,
issue.
but quite honestly, that's government. I mean, it doesn't. I as an elected official can put forward an ordinance. I don't have to take. If I want the public to feel comfortable with it, if I want my fellow councilors to support it, if I want those kinds of things, then I take it and I vet it. And I run it through the community and all of that, so that by the time
But
we get it to the
tradition
table,
of anything
by the
that has
time we
do
get
with
it to the
zoning-
table, then it comes through there like that. Now, this one is going to have a public hearing, and it's going to, will it pass or not? I don't know. We're going to be out there fighting like hell against it. I personally want to hear, I haven't seen the draft of it. I don't think it's been released yet or anything. And so I do want to see that. I am automatically suspicious like Pat because it's been drafted by the industry. But I want to go back real quick when you were asking why is the digital billboard bad?
Can we take a break? Because I've got to do the thing on civil.
Okay, tell us who we are.
It's
Where
Civil
we are.
Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Ogden. I'm sorry you threw me for a loop there,
Yeah,
Mark.
I know it's a difficult point to make.
It was. I fell asleep
we're,
there briefly.
We're streaming to you live from Broad Ripple. We are streaming live on IndianaTalks.com. Also on Live 365. If you go to the website for IndianaTalks.com, there's a donate button. Hit it. You can donate money so Gary Snyder, who does Indiana Talks, can buy equipment and software and enable the show to go on and on. He's not going to buy a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. He already told me he was not going to do that. Our guests today are Pat Andrews, and I forgot. I've got a book out. You can buy my ebook, $1 Billion Balls, which is about a fix being put in on the annual college basketball tournament, since I can't use the acronym, but I can in the book itself because it's artistic license. You can get that on Amazon.com. Just pull up $1 Billion Balls, or you can put my name in, Mark Small. You'll pick up my other 2 books if you do that, which are available. But
Is your 1975 book available, Mark?
Don't smirk while you say that.
He wrote an autobiography of 1 year of his life, and it took 2 volumes.
Hey, Proust took a lot of volumes too, and all he did was he lived in boring
1 year
France.
of his life
You
involves
didn't
2
know
volumes.
what that year was
It must
like.
have been a really busy year.
Yeah, I know. Our guests are Pat Andrews, who blogs on Had Enough Indy, and who ran for City County Council for the Democratic Party here in Marion County, and writes about government here, making better government. Also, our guest and our other panelist today is Karen Celestino Horseman. Karen's former member of the City County Council, Democratic Party, and is an attorney here in Indianapolis. And we were talking about electronic billboards. And I just want to say, before we get back to Karen on this topic, that we were in Vermont in 2006, and they do not allow billboards at all on their highways. We're driving down the highway. I didn't know where I was. I thought that was abhorrent. I didn't see a clover leaf with any development of any. I'm not going to say. I'll say fast food franchises. I won't say McAnything. There were no convenience stores. There were no motels. No Motel 6, 8, 10, 12, whatever. Nothing like that. It was just forests.
Damn forests.
And mountains. And then every once in a while, there was a sign that would say, like, Moose Crossing. Why'd they put that there?
How do they know to cross there?
No, if they didn't put it there, the moose are going to cross someplace else.
Yeah.
Or the bear crossing. I mean, they just put those right near each other, and it's just a natural antithesis. But we were just going through the state of Vermont, and it was like you go from New York, and it's all this, very important crap. I was gaining valuable information as a consumer here in the United States, so that I knew that there was a McDonald's, like, in 3 exits, like I didn't know before.
Many freeways now have little signs that have food on one sign. They'll have all the logos, and then the next sign will have the places where the inns you can stay at.
The legislature approved that. I was working
Yeah,
at
that's
the
very
legislature.
nice.
You
Nice.
can easily just
Yeah,
discern
it's
a
nice.
lot of
Yeah, but the
information.
fascist bastards in Vermont didn't have that. It would just have the town name.
And Vermont tends to be Republican, not
the
where
Bernie
I didn't mean
Sanders.
no.
Actually, no. They have a socialist United States senator,
cool.
and Howard Dean was the governor, but I think he was too far right wing. But they don't have any signs, and so we're talking about putting in electronic billboards here.
Right.
And I'm sorry to give this aesthetic view on it, but the aesthetic quality of the sign down at the Indiana State Fairgrounds is consistent with the aesthetics of the Indiana State Fairgrounds.
Well, when it comes to signage, here's how. This is what the city doesn't stop to think what it has to do. It has to play the parent. If I have a group of 5 and 6 year olds standing in front of me, and one of them wants my attention, what's their immediate thing they're going to do? They're going to start calling out my name. If I don't pay attention, then they start jumping up and down. Then they start waving their hands. Well, that's signage.
Yeah.
And this is the digital billboards. I mean, the whole purpose of advertising is to get your attention. So, if they can put a giant TV screen there flashing nothing but commercials, think of it like that, because that's all it is,
Exactly.
nothing but commercials, then they want to make sure they draw your attention to it. Now,
What's the problem with that?
the problem with that is that to get your attention, that means they're going to try and be brighter. They're going to try and move faster. They're going to try and do everything that will keep you from doing things such as looking straight ahead down the road, watching what the car to your left is doing.
Dealing with your coffee.
Yep.
Trying to tune in the radio.
Yep.
Doing
And other businesses will start to do the same thing.
Right, and that's like the kid, because let's go back to my kid analogy. Once you have one kid who starts doing that, then another child says, "Oh, I need Ms. Horseman's attention too." So they start doing it. So then they want to jump in front of the other kid, and they want to try and scream even louder to get the attention. And that's what happens if you don't have an adult there who will say, "You know what? We're going to draw parameters here. You're not going to do those kinds of things." That's the way it works in development overall. You have to be.
But also, who
prepared.
owns the skate? Because these billboards, or any billboard, is of large size. But who owns the city view?
Yeah.
We had, what was it? Was it in the 70s or 80s when the city decided it would do a takedown within 465, and any company that agreed to take down so many billboards inside 465 was granted the ability to put it along 465, which got more views. So the city recognized decades ago that it makes for a lovelier town.
Well, and so did Lady Bird Johnson.
Yes, and Scenic America does great work with billboards. But still, the city fathers have, it's been a decades-long process to keep our city views and not trash them up with huge advertisements.
Mark, well, I didn't know if you were ready to move on, but since Pat was here, I was going to ask her what's going on with the airport.
Yeah, but I just want to make one other point, because I think Karen made a point a couple of minutes ago that's a little bit misleading when you were talking about how ordinances are drafted and everything, and how you run them past the people and then get feedback. I always thought ordinances got drafted like in one of the bar rooms at the Columbia Club, and then they're rationalized in front of groups of residents of Indianapolis in town meetings, where they're allowed to speak as rapidly as they can for 2 minutes while the councilors yawn and jot down notes and stuff.
You didn't do that, did you?
And then they're.
No.
I'm talking about today.
Oh.
And then they're just
Like
passed.
your day.
And they're just passed, and they hope that they don't get Greg Ballard pissed off when Mayor Vaughn tells him whatever it is that they've done.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? You don't like it. You elected them.
I
Oh,
didn't.
no. Let's not go there. That's
Yeah.
not
I
the show.
did not.
Yeah, let's move on to the next topic, Mark.
Okay,
Since Pat was here, I thought we could ask her about the airport, because she's all the time talking about the airport.
go ahead.
Pat, what's
Ask
going
her.
on with the airport?
The airport, the thugs at the airport.
I know you don't like the people at the airport, the nice
no,
people.
I'm sure they're nice people. I've had many a good interaction with folks who work at the airport.
And that's sarcasm.
No,
Oh,
no,
Not sarcasm.
seriously. It's the
That's her talking, not me.
all right.
It's seriously. It's the policies of the airport and the actions of the airport that bring consternation to.
And
It
what is
should
the
be-
what is the
should-
airport city? I'm hearing about that.
Okay, a couple of years ago, the airport decided that maybe it just didn't want to have to sell off the thousands of acres of land that they own that they don't need for aviation purposes.
And if you've been in the airport, there's huge swaths of land.
And the ones that comes
Unoccupied.
to mind for most people are where the old terminal is on the east side of the airport along 465.
About to be soon to be was.
Soon to be demolished old terminal, and then there's the parking lots that accompany, and the little fast food joints, and the rental car properties. So the airport has this property that it no longer needs for aviation purposes, that it no longer needs for its security perimeter purposes. And the promise had always been that whenever they are in a situation where they have excess property that can be bundled, that it will be sold and put back on the property tax rolls, because airport land does not pay property taxes. Any building that's built for aviation purposes on airport land does not have to pay property taxes.
Did that originate with Evan Bayh's deal on United Airlines?
I don't know how old that law is.
Okay.
I don't think they have to do with each other, but I could be mistaken.
So if the airport rents out land for McDonald's, do they pay?
Lease, yes.
Lease out, yeah. Do they pay property taxes?
That would be considered part of the airport's.
So they would.
No, they wouldn't. Like FedEx doesn't pay on the building.
So that would place businesses outside the airport
Or
at
across the street
a
from the
competitive
airport.
disadvantage.
Yes, a gas station that's deemed part of the aviation experience on airport property doesn't pay property taxes, but the gas station across the street does on Washington Street.
So the airport has this whole bunch of land
Yes, thousands of acres.
that it's not using.
Some of it is the old terminal area. Some of it is property that the federal government gave them money to purchase for the noise abatement. If any houses were close to the noise tracks when planes take off and land, the airport would take FAA money and purchase the homes. And so the airport, through that means, acquired thousands of acres in Marion County, Hendricks County, and Morgan County. Most of the noise contrails go to the westward.
Okay, so they've got all that land.
All that land. So the promise has always been they're going to return it to the tax rolls. And they've done some of that, like in Decatur Township with Ameriplex, and the forced land swap with that industrial.
And the
park.
Ameriplex is not on the tax rolls. Or
Ameriplex-
they're in a TIF.
Most of it's in a TIF.
Okay.
But they're on the tax rolls. They're
Yeah.
paying taxes.
Into the TIF.
Yes. Well, most of it is. Some of it's outside. Some of Ameriplex development is outside
Okay.
the TIF. So we got this land now. The airport a couple years ago hired a firm to come up with a plan how the airport might use it and model it into an airport city or Aeropolis. And they kind of dropped that term because nobody can say it. But
Aeropolis.
Aeropolis. So an airport.
I
I've been
love
calling
big
it
banks.
Airport City. So what they want to do now is keep the land for themselves, lease it. So instead of this parcel paying property taxes, it'll pay lease payments.
Okay, and who's they?
Who's they?
Whoever takes the lease.
No. Who's leasing it out?
The airport.
Okay, who's the airport?
The airport is a municipal corporation in the state of Indiana.
Okay, it's owned by us? Okay.
She used
Okay.
quotation
So
marks.
where's the money go that they get for the leases?
They use it for their own operations.
Okay, so it doesn't go like to ease tax
They
burdens.
make no pilot payments. In fact, they make the claim that their agreement with the FAA precludes them from making any donations akin to a tax.
So the bottom line is, the airport has all this land that they've taken off the property tax rolls from
Yes.
Marion County,
Yes,
and it's not going back on.
yes.
and they're not paying taxes in for that land,
Correct.
and there's nothing we can do about it.
Oh yeah, there's something we can do about it. We keep talking about it until they change their mind. The airport, it gets when the airport doesn't take it off, put it back on the tax rolls. The airport wants to develop it as industrial parks. Now they're going to have an unfair advantage. There's Park Fletcher across 465 from the old terminal area. There's a Ameriplex on the south side of I-70.
They have to pay property taxes.
They have to pay property taxes. The airport will insist on abatements and things, more incentives for people to locate. The airport has shown poor judgment in the lease payments they require. So they have a history where you can do nothing but conclude that they will have an unfair advantage and press that advantage in competition with free market industrial parks. Plainfield has one on the west side.
Yeah, but that's Hendricks County, right?
Yeah,
well, who cares about them? We're Marion County.
Yeah, I get you. But nonetheless, that is another industrial park around the area. So now you have government.
I was kidding. I like people in Hendricks County. I was just kidding.
Well,
especially the judges, Mark.
I like all the people in Hendricks County.
But anyway, the airport will have an unfair advantage, and it's government expanding its footprint and its purpose. I mean, when on earth did anyone say, you know what an airport needs to do? An airport needs to be an industrial park developer.
Well,
and that's what they're doing, and the whole reason is to get money. And they don't want to step up like big men and say, you know what, we want more money. We want more money, and we want a cut of the property taxes, because by law they are allowed, if they wish, to join in.
But
to get
at the same time, they're using city services.
No.
They're
They
not?
have their own fire. They have their own police.
Oh, okay. They're running their own schools?
They don't have children to educate.
Okay. So it's just, then what's the harm?
Because they should not have anything to do beyond what is necessary for aviation. That's an important function. There's no doubt there. But when you're talking about property tax rolls, that's an important thing to pay for the police for the rest of us. You know, just because they carve it out and say they're going to protect it doesn't make it less valuable to the rest of us. Wayne, the old terminal, Wayne Township, that's a lot of money to Wayne Township schools that gets flushed down the toilet when it's not turned back on the tax rolls. Plus, you have this thing, why is the airport going to compete with legitimate free enterprise?
Unfairly compete.
In an unfair manner as well. But even to start the conversation with why are they going to compete with something that they don't need to be doing, and somebody else can do just fine in the free market system.
Well, I didn't understand why we needed a new airport anyway.
Well, no, the airport terminal stuff is another issue. But
and then name it after it. Never mind.
Well, they're forced.
Okay, here's my question, because I've not been following, so I'm playing devil's advocate. Airport.
That's why you're wearing a red jacket today, right?
Yeah, right behind me. That's it. Playing devil's advocate here. The airport revenues have really dropped sharply. Like the rest of the country, people are not using air travel as much, so their revenues have dropped because we're not having as many people flying out of Indianapolis. We have a.
Is their purpose revenue generation or infrastructure for planes?
Their purpose is to make sure that planes won't come in and out of here, so we can travel in and out of here.
No. It's for aviation, not for profit. Okay.
But so if you have, but you see, profit aviation doesn't just planes. If I'm going to have an industrial park out there that is going to, I don't know, say I get a tenant in there like a FedEx, but I don't know, another type that does, transports things back and forth. Then, logistical companies and that type of thing where they're going to use the services of the airport like that. Then that is one of the ways that I can make sure that my airport traffic is up and where it needs to be so that I can have planes coming in and out of here.
Well, actually, demand will, if the demand in the region for logistics and airplane travel rise, then the airport business will rise. But it's It's not correct to think that the airport hasn't been making money hand over fist, even with the recession. For their annual 2011, yes, so they would have reported that last year in 2012. They made cash $75 million profit.
No.
So they're not hurting, and they can provide the infrastructure. That is their job, is to provide the infrastructure.
In just a second, guys, this is my last time that I'm interrupting the times. It's lengthened now. We're doing it every 20 minutes.
I know.
This is Civil Discourse Now. He's Paul Ogden.
And he's Mark Small.
We are live streaming to you today from Broad Ripple on the north side of Indianapolis on a beautiful February 9th, 2013. We are live streaming on... We're on Ustream, but we're on IndianaTalks.com. IndianaTalks.com is a network of Indiana-based talk shows that was started by Gary Snyder in Marion, and Fort Marion's where the station is. But this is on the internet. If you go to IndianaTalks.com, there's a donate button. Hit it, donate money. You can buy more equipment and software. You can also go to civildiscoursenow.com website, and you can pull up past shows that we have because we're on video as well as audio, and that's where we have past shows. Paul has a website. Paul, what's your website?
Ogden on Politics.
I've never been. Is it interesting?
It's really hard. It's like you got to do HTTP something or other.
Oh, I see.
Nobody can find it.
Are there pictures on it?
I do put pictures on mine, unlike yours.
Oh, okay. And also,
I have a website.
Okay.
You got a website?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Karen at kchorseman.com. Letter K, letter C, horseman.com. But mine doesn't have blog posts. It's just about my law practice.
Okay. Well, that's fair enough. Also, you can go to Amazon.com and buy my e-novel, $1 Billion Balls, which is about the basketball tournament, which is about to come up.
We have an audience.
And we have our studio audience here.
And Pat has a blog.
Pat Andrews is our other panelist today, and Pat has had enough Indiana.
Had enough indie.
Had enough indie. Had enough indie. It's a question.
.com.
.com.
Which was actually Ballard's slogan,
stole
which was actually, was it LBJ's? Whose slogan was it before that?
I don't know, but I can
All
tell
right.
you this: I saw the film clip of Barry Goldwater
Goldwater
reciting Carl Hess's lines at the 1964 Republican National Convention at the Cow Palace in San Francisco when he said, "Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue." And that was Barry Goldwater's swan song right before he lost in one of the biggest landslides of presidential history. We were talking about Indianapolis's airport city, and what they're doing on it is basically wanting to develop something against the public. It doesn't work out for us. We don't gain it by their doing that as taxpayers.
We don't gain. Well, they go beyond their purpose, and their purpose isn't to be developers.
They're supposed to get planes to land and take off, and it's the people.
And if Central Indiana population rises, that will drive more plane traffic. If the logistics industry, which is a perfect suit here with the crossroads of the country, if those facilities like Amazon.com has a couple of facilities over in Plainfield, then and they're shipping your books left and right, and some of them by airplane. So as those businesses,
no, they're not. This is an e-book.
through the free market system,
it's an e-book.
through the capitalist system, locate in our central Indiana region, then the airport traffic should rise in a more organic fashion than the airport trying to cause somehow magically. Through their lack of expertise, mind you.
No, because airports around the country are now competing for this. They're competing for the Amazon hubs and all the logistics companies and everything else. So to become
The airports aren't.
the airports around, those who have airports like ours are doing that. But regardless, There's competition out there for this.
Yes.
So if I can offer a company a deal where they can come in and set up shop and it's going to cost them less, I've got them right here next to the airport and all of that. For the two of us, it's a win-win.
No.
I'm just saying, I don't think that you can construe.
The
Let me
land,
finish,
the
please.
land would still
Can I
be
finish my
available.
sentence?
Yeah, let Karen. Go ahead.
Thank you. All I'm saying is that when you talk about defining the business of the airport, I don't think you can, in this day and age, limit it only to saying that all it is airplanes. I think it has. I think the business model for airports has changed. Now, is the airport in this instance doing it in the right way? That I don't know.
Well,
Let me go back to the land. If land's returned to the tax rolls, it still likely would only be an industrial park because of the height, the FAA requirements that the buildings be short, right next to the runways. So that land's purpose likely is going to be an industrial park. The question is, who's going to own that? The taxpayers get paid the property taxes. Does it? Do the property owners have to compete on a fair basis with other industrial parks?
Yeah, but here's the thing.
So that we get that competition that's supposed to drive down prices.
I was going to point out too, the
encourage-
property had to be taken. If it's taken through eminent domain, you have to take it for the purpose of the airport. You
A
can't
lot of it is
take it for
not
commercial
eminent
development.
domain. I don't know what originally happened.
Well, and I don't understand. Our airport is competing against, and I don't question the fact that our airport is competing against the airports of other cities similarly situated, and they're wanting to get that business for what? I mean, they're competing for what? Either we're benefiting as a political entity and the people of Marion County, or it's some small group that's running the airport with like team jerseys on that say Indy Airport, yay rah us, and it's not Indianapolis International Airport. It's Indianapolis Ware Cook Airport. I'm sorry, I will not say that it's Indianapolis International Airport. That's just a generic. Everything becomes
Legal term.
Yeah, well, I just don't like it.
Only one of the terminals was called Weir Cook, not the entire airport.
No, the entire airport at one
Used
time,
to be
Paul.
called. All right,
Yes,
all right.
it
Well-
still
It should
is.
be.
All right,
It's
all right,
still
all right.
Weir Cook.
Okay.
But it's like,
And it's still IU School of Law at Indianapolis.
At
I don't know what
Indianapolis.
the heck that other.
actually, it used to be DePauw University School of Law, but that's going back a ways.
That's
But
really
the thing is, if they're competing with other cities' airports just because it's the airport itself and there's a small group of people that are benefiting from that, then I think that there's something functionally wrong.
No, but that's just it. They're not. When you say a small group of people benefiting from
getting the profit.
getting the profit from it, for the airport is what this. It's a nonprofit entity. So what
That
it's
doesn't
trying
mean they
to
don't
do
make money.
is that they're trying to. Well, they have to have bank accounts. They have a terrible infrastructure cost out there. It's expensive to run an airport, and so if you're going to run the airport, then you've got to be able to have money to be able to run it.
Let's talk about something.
What Speedway?
Yeah, let's talk about something that you
There you
fly over when you're coming in on the west side to the airport, and you look down and you see this oval, and it is the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now, for years, I've been so proud of the Holman George family saying, Ursay's. They came to Indianapolis, and Indianapolis really kind of hoarded itself out in order to get the Colts to come here. But you know what? Holmans have never asked for a penny. Simons, hey, they bought the Pacers for $12 million, and people were begging them to buy the Pacers to keep them here. Now Pacers are worth $400 million. Simons say, hey, you're giving the Ursays so much, we want a taste too. And then the Ursays want more than the Simons got because they were first to the trough, and then the Simons come back and want more. The whole time the Holman George family is sitting there, and I'm thinking, they're not asking for any money at all. I am just so proud. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway, has like the huge events, the Indianapolis 500, the greatest spectacle in motor racing, the Brickyard 400, which doesn't draw as many people anymore, but still has a lot of people, and there's still. No, now they're asking for $100 million.
according to the Star.
Yes.
And for things like putting up lights and running night races there, that's a residential community. I'm pretty sure that will not go over well.
I bet that community goes along with whatever the Speedway ones.
Yeah, and really
It's part of that community.
yeah, but also there's not residential housing
Pretty close.
right up next to it. No, I mean,
Well, it's really close.
It
I mean,
is
I
close.
walk around there because of the mini. You've got the golf course on one side. On the south side, you've got commercial
West
thing. The west side, you've got the Coke parking lot.
Yeah, but then you get right into
Yeah, and then you've got residential. Yeah, but
They
it's,
can hear it.
Yeah.
No doubt you can hear it.
yeah, but it's not
Right
like
here
when
at my house.
it's not like when the people moved there. It's not like 54th and Winthrop where the people didn't realize that they were going to put in like this
But
venue.
there's another question is the economic development. I mean, I think we just pull that out like some kind of charm statement, and everything's going to be wonderful. And the city of Speedways decided that they took by eminent domain some properties on the south side of the track, and they've been developing that, hoping to make it a racing
What do they call that? I forget.
area, for the
a
racing company.
Raciopolis.
Yeah,
There was a
racing-
term. I forget. Like it'd be all year round. You had like
Yeah.
events and stuff out there.
But also they want it for the industry itself.
Yeah.
It is kind of peculiar that Indianapolis hasn't capitalized in an extreme way on the racing industry, and because people make parts for things, and then they can sell those.
Okay,
to
wait, so you're saying
But
that
the city of Speedway has just put together an economic development package, whether you liked it or you didn't. It now exists. And they've got bonds to pay, and that was economic development. And now the Speedway's saying, well, if they get $100 million over 20 years, that'll be economic development. And you end up with what's left.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to suck up all the economic development gravy that's produced, what on earth are you actually gaining?
no, because what you have to gain is we need soccer.
Mhm.
Yes, we have to
Well,
do
one
that
thing
too.
that
I want roller derby.
Governor
We
Pence,
have roller derby.
Governor
roller
Pence,
derby.
Yeah, the Indy roller
we do have
derby.
roller derby, by the way.
Well,
Governor
there we go,
Pence
in
has
the
taken
stadium.
a position against is the subsidies to the racetracks there, and if he's taken a position against that, I wonder, whether he's going to take the same position with.
No. Horse racing
Horse
in
racing.
Indiana is different, Paul, than the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
But they don't pay their way, is my point.
May I point out, Indianapolis Motor Speedway, there's a provision in this, there used to be in the Sunday liquor sales that said you could not sell alcohol in the state of Indiana except in restaurants that did so much in food business or at an enclosed auto racing track of 1.5 miles length or
Yeah.
greater. Now, parenthetically, there's only one racetrack in the state of Indiana that meets those parameters or those specifications, and that's on the west side of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But that being said, when does it stop our putting money into sports, and why don't we just vacate the city, eliminate residential housing, have these venues and some hotels and stuff, and then you've got like this, well, there's Indianapolis.
You need
That's sarcasm
residences
again.
so that people can attend the games.
No,
Yeah,
'cause-
you want the ticket sales, so you got to have the population do the ticket sales.
No, because if you do the airport right, people can fly in from other places in their
Exactly.
corporate jets with Don Marsh, and then they can go to the game, and then they're not having to worry about and then they stay at the hotel. They see a soccer game, and
They ride the rail from the airport out to
There's no
the city.
rail.
I know.
oh, there will be. I mean, that's
Maybe
just.
not. But
After
the question is,
second day.
should we go down this road? And I think that the public's patience for these corporate subsidies for the sports teams is running out.
Only until the Pacers make the NBA playoffs or are on a run for it, or the Colts
Well, they're definitely on the
Make-
run. They're going to make it this year.
or the Colts make a run for
They
it.
did this year.
If you look,
Does it matter what the public thinks in this city?
Well, I think it does.
No, I think-
no, that's a good point.
but I think that it does, because as long as you don't have this giant uprising of people against the notion of investing in sports, then they're going to the people that run things are going to continue to do it. And as long as, and we've been on, think of the run we've been on. The Colts sucked, the Pacers sucked. We weren't pumping money into them really. We enticed the Colts to come here. Then The Pacers got Reggie Miller, and they started winning early 90s, and they were making the playoffs and doing really well. And then it gets to the end of the 90s, and the Pacers started sucking it right as Peyton Manning was drafted. Right. So the Colts start going up, and then the Colts are really going up, and they lose Peyton Manning for a year. Everybody said, we're going to have number one draft pick. And then Andrew Luck comes in, screws everything up for next year's draft, but the Colts make it into the playoffs, and the Pacers are in the playoffs. Now, if you ask the person in the street, should we cut funding to the Colts or the Pacers, that person, I'd say if you did a polling sample and did a fairly worded poll, should we cut funding to, or not give them that money? Those people are going, well, we're winning right now.
No, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
80% of people would say no, that don't give them money.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. I guarantee you.
You going to put money on?
Yeah, we'll put money. We'll do a poll. We'll put $10 on it and pay $50,000 for a pollster.
Yeah, but you know what? This is a state. They've gone to the state to ask for this.
State's even less for
and state is, Mike Pence is sending us back money. So we got money to give them.
But the income tax component should also have a county option income tax portion. And obviously this is brand new news, so that amount needs to be disclosed.
A last thing, and then because we've only got a couple minutes left. There was a poll I heard about yesterday that Ed Schultz had done. Listen to the wording of this poll, and then guess what the results were. Ed Schultz worded the poll and said, do you think that the United States should be able to use drones to kill American citizens who might be involved in activities against the United States? 78% said yes. That's 78% said, and this gets into the whole thing about drones, and we talked about it last week, but I thought this was
fascinated by drones.
Well, I think when we've got the best percentage on collateral deaths that I've heard, in other words, killing innocent people and damaging other, is 80%. That's the best. In other words, we're only accurate 20% of the time. We're killing.
I don't know why drones are so much more inaccurate than our manned planes.
Ask why.
I don't know why.
Ask the commanders.
Don't know if that's true.
Ask the commanders who were involved in going in on Osama bin Laden. For some reason, they didn't use drones. They used people on the ground. They knew they wanted to get a specific person. And so now we've got these drones all over the place that are making all these hits on people, and they've got a list of people that presumably some,
Are you concerned you're on the list, Mark?
No, I'm not. What I'm concerned about is
that
we're killing people without due process of law, and that we've done away with the concept of having to declare war. And so we have a government that's doing things without any kind of checks on it, any kind of stops at all, and I don't think that that's what the purpose of government is.
You brought this up when there's 2 minutes left?
Yeah.
He's a bastard.
No, I'm not.
That's why he doesn't want to be contradicted.
Had I been there, wouldn't have been that whole estate battle.
I'm bringing my own drone will be following you home tonight.
Well, but it's. I mean, we'll do this. We'll try to do this next week. But it's like I couldn't believe the report that came out that there's some kind of they can issue an order and snuff somebody, and there is no review. And it extends to American citizens. And we have drones flying over us now.
Wait a minute. Are you talking about that the language that's included in the Defense Funding Act? Because if that's what you're referring to, that's not what it says and not what it stands for.
You're out of time. This has been Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Ogden.
It has been our pleasure and honor to have our guests, Pat Andrews and Karen Celestino Horseman, and our live studio audience here. We've been talking about a whole bunch of stuff today. We'll be back next week. You can hear us on Indiana Talks. You can catch us on civildiscoursenow.com. Have a good week and have a pleasant day.